quorum. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator, Jesse Poole.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in the original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is Plan Commission public comment period, and I do not see that we have any public comment. Next is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals today? Seeing no raised hands, no disclosures or recusals. Next, we will consider the minutes of the February 8th, 2020 regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Cantrell.
Recommend that the minutes be approved as presented.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. We will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is review of the scheduled upcoming meetings. In March, we have two meetings, March 8th and March 22nd. And in April, we have two meetings, April 12th and April 26th. All four of those are regular meetings. Next, we will do our consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item tonight. Also included on our consent agenda are referrals to future meetings. So these items are placed onto a consent agenda and they are addressed at the beginning of our meeting. People who are interested in those items then can disconnect unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. On the consent agenda tonight are agenda items 3, 4, 5, and then for referral are agenda items 7, 8, and 9. Is there anyone who would like to request separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will go through then the consent agenda. The first item is agenda item 3, Legistar 63860, amending the Madison General Ordinances to add live-work unit as a permitted use in the downtown core, urban office residential, and urban mixed-use districts. The next item on the consent agenda is agenda item 4, Legistar 63905, amending the Madison General Ordinances to add keeping of chickens as an accessory use for recreation, community, or neighborhood centers. Next is agenda item 5, Legistar 63968, amending Madison General Ordinances to allow vacuums outside of car washes in specified districts with supplemental regulations. Agenda item 7 is to be referred to May 10th at the request of the applicant. It is Legistar 63216, creating section 28.022 through 00482 of the Madison General Ordinances. The next item for referral is agenda item 8, Legistar 63758, to be referred to the March 8th agenda at the request of the applicant. And finally, agenda item 9 should be referred. It is to March 8th to allow public hearing notices to be sent. It is Legistar 63476. That completes the items on our consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll recommend approval of the consent agenda and the referrals as indicated.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. I will assume unanimous consent of our consent agenda unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the consent agenda passes unanimously. The next item is under new business, agenda item 2, Legistar 63041, amending the Triangle Monona Bay Neighborhood Plan to revise the transportation recommendations for the North Side Public Street from Regent Street to West Washington, from bike ped friendly to bike ped only with emergency vehicle access for the north section from Regent Street to Braxton Place. And I believe that we have a presentation by Ms. Stouter and some comments perhaps by Matt Wachter and Linda Horvath. Ms. Stouter.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I'll just have a few comments to start and then turn it over to my colleagues, Linda and Matt, to be sure that the Plan Commission sees the context of the amendment before you this evening. So the Triangle Monona Bay Neighborhood Plan was just adopted in 2019. And one of the recommendations in that plan as we look forward to pretty dramatic redevelopment of the entire triangle with Bayview and the CDA sites included, is a north-south street running through that triangle, relinking Regent Street down to West Washington Avenue. Linda will have some slides here in a moment to show that. As this amendment, which has moved through the process for the last couple of months, has moved through, the Transportation Planning and Policy Board provided a unanimous recommendation to support the amendment. And then the Community Development Authority recently met and provided support for the amendment as well on a 4-2 vote. And during those two meetings, as staff, we presented some concerns with the amendment. I think as the planning process was occurring in recent years and beyond, we have felt as staff that providing access for residents in the triangle should actually include access for automobiles through this site in order for residents to not only perhaps drive and park near their residences, but also especially for CDA residents in the future, many of whom are differently abled, to be able to have the access to drop-offs, pickups, and delivery of services that they need. So that's been really the focus of, I think, staff concern about the proposed amendment. We've been asked by the Alder sponsoring the amendment and others who you'll hear from tonight to reconsider supporting the amendment and reconsider our position. And I think we have done that. There have been many, much energy and time on the part of residents in the Triangle and others demonstrating their concern with automobile traffic through the site. They have a variety of concerns, and you'll hear directly from many of them this evening about safety and use of this street as a potential cut through. I think at this point, it's just important to note that staff still does have a concern with the way that a complete prohibition of automobile traffic might limit options for the community development authorities' redevelopment of their properties. And Linda and Matt will talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to show here a clause that staff is proposing that could be added, consideration by the Plan Commission and Council to add this to the resolution. And with this added clause, I think that staff from multiple agencies would be much more comfortable with the amendment. I'm going to just share screen here. And this is something I emailed to the Commission just recently today, as well as to the Alder after talking it through with him. The clause is bolded here, and it is simply at the very end of the resolution to note, be it further resolved that in conjunction with the design for future redevelopment of CDA property, very limited automobile access on this portion of the street may need to be allowed in order to meet the mobility and service delivery needs of CDA residents. If that limited access is needed, the street will be designed to prohibit use as a through street for automobile use. So that is a clause that, if added to the resolution, staff would support the amendment at this time. And what I'd like to do now, just so that we're more comfortable with the site we're looking at and Plan Commissioners can recall this process back in 2019, I'll turn it over to Linda Horvath, who will discuss very briefly the planning process, but more importantly, show an overview of the site and make sure everyone knows the location that we're talking through. And then Matt Wachter will talk a little bit in his role as CDA director this evening. We'll talk a little bit about the prospects for redevelopment of the CDA properties and how this decision might impact them. And I think with that, I will share screen and turn it over now to Linda. Let's see. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, members of the Plan Commission, and thank you, Heather. The city began the Triangle Monona Bay neighborhood planning process with a racial equity and social justice analysis. And I'll have you go to the next slide, Heather. So this slide is just showing you the many different inputs that planning staff receives during a planning process. The Triangle Monona Bay Steering Committee advises staff as it drafts the plan. That committee included 3 residents of CDA's Triangle Neighborhood Housing, 2 Monona Bay residents, 1 business owner, 1 CDA resident serving on the CDA board, 3 property owners, and a major employer. The committee meetings were all held on the Triangle in various different community rooms of CDA apartment buildings, the Bayview Community Center, just to make sure that we were giving residents as much chance as possible to hear what the committee was up to with its work and provide public comment. There was also a Hmong and Spanish interpreter at all of the committee meetings, as we had 2 residents from Bayview Housing who didn't speak English as a first language. The committee participated in 16 different meetings throughout the course of the process to edit plan drafts that the planning staff provided to them. We also work closely with other city agencies. A number of the folks on the call today from city engineering and traffic engineering were involved, as well as city parks and many others. We also hear, of course, from many different stakeholders throughout the process. If you could flip to the next slide, Heather. So we conducted a robust public participation process, and I know we were just before this body about 20 months ago with this plan, so you probably recall a lot of what was involved in putting the plan together. 3 public open houses with 50 to 75 people participating at each, and again, all on the triangle, so everybody could come and view the drafts. Also held office hours, about 22 to 24 office hours over a 6-week period in all the CDA buildings and the Bayview Community Center, as well as the Parkview apartments across the way on West Wash. So we did a lot of listening to what residents had to say about plan drafts. And that feedback really did inform the continual evolution of the plan over the 18-month period. A lot of what residents had to say is reflected in this plan throughout. Next slide. So what you're seeing on the screen is from the adopted plan, showing you changes to land use, responding directly to what property owners wished. Area A is showing you an area where the height range was applied there of 5 to 12 stories for healthcare property owners who may want to build some taller structures on those sites, mixed-use structures potentially with more employment, a lot more employment in those locations. Areas B and C, B refers to the Gay Braxton property owned by CDA. That property owner intends to double its housing units on that site. So that land use change to medium density from high density is going to allow for that to happen, while also responding more directly to the lower height and less density really than high density allows. Area C is the Bayview property, and that property again is about to redevelop all of its housing and expand its community center. So the change in land use there responds directly to what Bayview intends to do with its property. Area D, I'll just briefly mention, is also CDA property. It's where the grocery store is right now. The steering committee, through the course of its process and through its work with CDA, hearing what CDA wanted for its property, what residents wanted, which was to retain the grocery store on that site, the change in height there going up to, I believe it's up to 8 stories from the height that it was previously, will allow CDA to build a much taller structure, a mixed-use structure that will retain a grocery on the first floor as residents strongly supported. You can flip to the next slide. So the next slide is showing you an aerial image of the triangle itself. And again, this plan was broader than just the triangle. So the plan includes a lot of different recommendations for a larger area, but the triangle is where most of the change is going to happen over the next 5 or so years. All of the housing basically is probably going to be rebuilt. Certainly Bayview's housing up at the corner of Regent and West Wash will be totally rebuilt. The community center will be rebuilt and expanded. The Gay Braxton property up along Regent, again, CDA intends to double the amount of housing units there. And again, the healthcare property owners are probably going to build much taller structures with much more employment. A lot of changes happening. It's coming soon. Braxton Place today is the only public access in and out of this whole triangle area. It's the only way for residents to get in and out, the only way for a lot of the emergency vehicles that need to access the site, get in and out, visitors of family members, service providers who come daily to provide services to residents, particularly in the CDA buildings. It really serves the yellow school bus that comes to and from to pick up the Bayview elementary kids. So it's got a lot of pressure on it. Throughout the course of this planning process, a lot of recommendations were made. And in fact, our plan includes 26 different head bike improvements for the neighborhood area here. One of the major ones is an extension of the East Campus Mall through the Triangle over to the Ped Bike overpass and on to Brittingham Park. So that's that green dotted line Heather's pointing out. And then there is 26 Ped Bike recommendations and one recommendation to add a street to the neighborhood, and that includes the white dotted line that Heather's pointing out there to bring residents into the Triangle area to serve the new community center that CDD is putting money in annually to operate that center, and would like that center to be a much more open and welcoming place for all neighborhood area residents. So we've got a lot of new things coming, and we always look holistically at a site like this and look at what we can do as planners to bring better public access, but really here, as we learn throughout the process, residents are what really is driving what we're showing here as recommendations. One of the changes, or the primary change that's before you this evening to amend the plan would be turning that northern portion of the street to Ped Bike only. And Heather explained to you that we as staff feel retaining the original plan recommendation to provide fully multimodal access on that stretch is important. It's really important to the many residents who depend on whether it's assisted transit vehicles that take them to and from their front doors, taxis. We've also had, the Bayview property owner as well as residents talk about high school kids who are crossing Regent Street to get over to their bus stop for West High. Metro has indicated there's a possibility they could bring the school bus onto the Triangle and change that access for high school kids, making it safer for them as well. So we believe strongly vehicle access is really going to be important for everybody involved here. And we recommend that. You could flip to the next slide, Heather. And this is showing you a diagram of the potential new street through the Triangle. This was developed in coordination with planning, traffic engineering, and the fire department. And what we're showing here is a 34-foot wide street with vehicles able to go in both directions, parking on the street, which residents, time and again, when we spoke with people through all the hours we spent on the Triangle, parking was a huge need and something they want to see improved. And so that is showing you the narrowest street we were allowed, given particularly aerial fire access. So as new multi-story buildings are built along a new street, fire regulations require that there be at least 26 feet of passing lanes or vehicle lanes. And then if you add in the parking on that comes to 34 feet. So we also are showing wider sidewalks than would be typical. And that will allow, as we were given feedback by residents, at least 2 wheelchairs to pass on the sidewalk. And the many kids, the many others who use assisted mobility features would be able to more readily walk up and down those sidewalks. We also talked quite a bit with traffic engineering about the many different traffic calming features that would be important to include along any new street on the Triangle. Bump outs are something that was talked about to narrow the vehicle access into the neighborhood, as well as right in, right only onto to and from Regent and to and from West Wash. As you know, there's a median down West Wash as well that further restricts anybody from turning left into the Triangle from that location. Continental crosswalks, those large white blocky crosswalks that draw attention to the crossing, potentially a traffic circle. There are many different things that engineering and traffic engineering have spent time talking with the committee, the neighborhood committee, and staff talking with us about how this street would, in all likelihood, not be a cut-through street at all for the general public. If you flip to the next slide, I think this will be Matt's cue to talk a little bit about access and how it would be affected with the two different options.
Thanks, Linda. So the CDA last year identified the triangle as its next sort of major focus of redeveloping its housing portfolio. And so one of the things we've done is we've engaged consultants who specialize in public housing redevelopment, and they started to look at the portfolio. And really what it's looking like is that the first phases of redevelopment of the triangle will be the properties on this eastern edge of things. And so we're still, we haven't designed buildings yet, but we've identified this will be sort of the next phase of things that we focus on. And like Linda said, on this Gay Braxton block, it's likely that we're going to be roughly doubling the number of units that are there as we redevelop them, and there'll be taller buildings. And as has been mentioned tonight, the residents of the triangle, specifically the residents who are likely to be in here, have relatively high rates of disability. We serve a number of elderly people. And so it's important they have as close as possible to door-to-door access for vehicles for picking them up to go to appointments and things like that. And in version A, that a lot of that's provided on the new north-south street. And if we move to the version where there's the path, we just need to provide an alternative way for vehicular access to, especially any building we put along Regent Street, so that we can still have pick up for people. We still have service providers coming in and out of the buildings, things like that. And because you can't stop your car on Regent Street, it's going to probably have to be done through some sort of private driveway that we have to create because we don't have street access there. And again, we haven't designed the site or the building, but adding those drives are going to have, we'll just have to adapt to them. They'll have consequences. And the site, like I said, we're probably doubling the number of units. And then because we're extending East Campus Mall and adding that path, the site actually is going to get 25-ish% smaller than it is today. So we just start adding constraints that we're going to have to design around. And there will be trade-offs. So more driveway will mean that we have less green space, or we'll have to put our stormwater someplace else. So all of these things can be designed around, but we just already have a number of constraints that are out there. Additionally, as was mentioned, given the population that we serve, we do have a relatively high frequency of emergency vehicles coming to the site multiple times a week for wellness checks and things like that. So emergency vehicle access is really important as we look to develop the site. So that's really all I have. I also want to mention that we do have people from TE here. So we have Chris Fedakowski and Sean Malloy, who can answer more technical transportation questions that I can't answer.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath and Mr. Wachter. From here, we will move on to registrants. And we do have a number of registrants. The first registrant is Nate Shore, 601 Bayview, Madison, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak, representing the Bayview Foundation. Mr. Shore.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Nate Shore, and I'm the Community Programs Manager here at Bayview. And I'm speaking tonight not to editorialize or inject my own opinions, but to simply amplify the voices of Bayview residents, many of whom struggle to take part in meetings like this because of things like language barriers, digital literacy and access issues, and honestly, even just a general sense of unfamiliarity with city processes. So in an effort to make sure that their voices were fairly represented here, we distributed a survey directly to all of our residents over the past few weeks about this very issue. And of the 36 households that responded, 70% preferred the half road option from this amendment. 80% of the households said that they were worried about safety risks and traffic that come with the full road. I also wanted to read the comments that were shared on that survey, and we actually have some comments from people who, from what I can tell, are actually here on this call. So I'll just leave their comments out and let those people speak for themselves. So one of our residents, Nia, shared, there are a lot of residents in the Triangle that have a disability. Please think about them. Will it be safe for those who use walkers, canes, wheelchairs, etc.? We need more info and details of why the city wants a street there. Jewel shared, I worry about the safety of our children when playing outside and having to look out for cars and other vehicles. Also, I want peace and quiet for our area. Tang shared, I'm concerned that the traffic will be too heavy and too noisy. Also, maybe drivers will use this as a shortcut and speed through. There are many elderly people that may be afraid to walk through. Me shared, I'm worried about child safety and always having to be on the lookout. It'll be too noisy. Annette wrote, the full road is going to have too much heavy traffic that's going to be unsafe for children, elderly, and handicapped peoples. The half street is a much better plan. Basilza shared, there are many young children at Bayview and they already have a busy West Washington and Regent Street. It's better to not add more traffic. And Asita wrote, and she shared these public comments in written form as well. We are not afraid of losing what we have. We are just afraid that it won't be safe. We do understand change and what goes along with it. Can you relate to that? Residents at Bayview are willing to adapt to changes, but we can also voice our concerns when we do not feel it's safe for our children and our elderly. How do we picture our kids riding their bikes with all incoming cars? Visibility, damage, parking, negligence. You have Meritor, UW, Select Hospital, and now the new hotel in this area. These are infrastructures with employees that have cars and work all shifts. On Badger game days, we have cars and people everywhere. Let's picture that. And those are all the comments that we do have to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. The next registrant is James Corona, 523 Bayview, Madison, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak. Mr. Corona, you have 3 minutes.
James, you might have a prompt to unmute yourself. You are muted on our end.
James, we cannot hear you. Do you have a prompt to unmute? You will need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it may be hidden behind your screen. You might have to click around and see if you can find it, but there should be a little box that it looks like they left.
To have lost him.
Yeah,
We
probably
will
coming back.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next registrant and come back to Mr. Corona if he reconnects. The next registrant is Douglas Hunt, 4234 Savannah Court, Middleton, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Hunt.
Yes, thanks very much. Hi, my name is Doug Hunt, and I attend Faith Community Bible Church, which is across the street from Bayview, and CDA housing, and we have church members in the Triangle who attend, and we also volunteer with residents there. So like Nate, I want to speak in support of the amendment to the Triangle and also amplify the voices of CDA residents. In particular, I'll just make a couple of points. I want to highlight that residents of the Triangle define connectivity within their neighborhood by walkability and not drivability. This isn't surprising in that the Triangle Monona Bay study area and the TMB plan documents that residents of the Triangle choose walking or bus travel at a rate 2.5 times the rate in the rest of Madison. And the TM plan also found that residents are significantly less likely to own a car than elsewhere in Madison. Currently, there are no issues with delivery or emergency vehicle access, and the amendment as it stands will actually increase access via West Washington Avenue. That's the half-street option. So opening the northern portion to delivery and paratransit vehicles only, in my mind, doesn't make sense, and it will also be difficult to enforce. It will then create traffic safety risks, especially for Bayview residents. So I urge you to listen to the voices of Triangle residents in this regard and approve the amendment to the plan as it stands without the additional clause. Just a note to the chair, we're sharing a computer down at this Triangle, and so there will be other members who would wish to speak. They've been registered, but they'll be using this Zoom account. So if I can give you those names, that would be helpful.
Yes, it would be.
Okay, it's Kristen Russell, Cindy Julius, and Jackie Finney.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunt. The next registrant is Robert Vetter, 4403 Rutland Dunn Road, Oregon, Wisconsin, neither support nor oppose and wishing to speak. Mr. Vetter, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Bob Vetter. I'm the chaplain for Triangle Community Ministry. And based upon conversations I've had with others, I understand that in 2019 hearings were held to determine the attitudes of Triangle community residents regarding the suggestion of adding a new street to be routed through the Triangle neighborhood. It's my impression that Triangle residents strongly oppose the idea for multiple reasons. Further, I believe that they also resisted the possibility of a more limited version of the proposed street, one running between Braxton and West Washington. I understand that despite strong opposition from Triangle residents, the city's representatives have continued with plans for a new street in the Triangle neighborhood. The city's representatives' determined efforts to add a new street through the neighborhood trouble me. Certain questions are unavoidable. For example, why is Triangle community resistance to the proposed street apparently being ignored? Do the opinions of Triangle residents not recognized as important or fully as important as those of others with a different point of view? Second, if a new street were added, Triangle residents would have to live with it as a constant, intrusive, unwelcome presence in their midst. The same cannot be said of those who would use the street to pass through the neighborhood. Therefore, Triangle resident opinions should have greater, not lesser weight because of the negative impact the street would have on their lives. Third, consider this question. Suppose the city proposed building a new street through a more affluent neighborhood, one populated by property-owning taxpayers. Imagine further that the idea met strong neighborhood resistance. Would the city proceed with its plans? Would it ignore the opposition of the residents? Finally, this is a justice issue. It's about fairness. It's about treating Triangle residents as full equals in every sense imaginable with respect to all the other residents in this city. A just society is one in which all citizens are treated equally, including those who may have limited resources, who are vulnerable, who are powerless, who are often marginalized and forgotten. Triangle residents deserve to have their voices heard and heeded. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Vetter. Our next registrant is Cindy Julius, 755 Braxton Place, Madison, in support, wishing to speak. And I believe that she is one of the ones that will be using Mr. Hunt's. Ms. Julius.
My name is Cindy Julius. I live at 755 Braxton Place, apartment A308. I also am the president of the Triangle Neighborhood Organization, and I encompass about 385 people. I do have a vocal cord problem. So I'm going to have someone read my statement. Her name is Marianne.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Please imagine for a moment, if you will, a beautiful sunny day, a mother with her daughter sitting on the grass, and with the toddler playing and teetering about. All of a sudden, the child breaks into a run and the mother can't keep up. Meanwhile, a car turns from Regent onto the road that runs through the triangle from Regent to West Wash. The car hits the little girl. She screams in doing, the mother screams in shock as well. The car drives away onto West Washington. Also, imagine a road right through your front yard. Every day, you have to navigate this road. You are a double amputee, or you use a walker. You have had a stroke, perhaps, and it has affected the right side of your body, your legs, and your balance. How would it be every day to maneuver that road? Now, we all know that we don't own houses with white picket fences, but still, these are our homes. We just don't want a car racing in our front yard. In conclusion, I will let you know that 30 plus people that live in the triangle are for this amendment. Please join us and vote yes. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Deborah Mcallister, 755 Braxton Place, in Madison, support, wishing to speak. Ms. Mcallister, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, there is no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, I don't believe that was one of the people that Mr. Hunt indicated would be using a different. So we will move on to Jackie Finney, 755 Braxton Place in Madison, in support and wishing to speak.
Hi, my name is Jackie Finney. I've been living at Braxton Place for 4 years. And all the while I've been here, I've watched the park and I've watched kids catch the bus and they play on the park until the bus comes. And not only that, there's residents that have grandchildren that come and visit them and they take them over to the park once in a while. So we need to be careful. We want half road because of these reasons. Safety for our children's. Full road would be just too much traffic. Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Ms. Finney. Our next registrant is Nina Ogawa, 503 Bayview, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Ms. Ogawa, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, there is no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, thank you. Our next registrant is Pashua Zhong, 202 Bayview, Madison, in support and wishing to speak.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. My name is Pashua Zhong. I live at Bayview for 8 years. By having a road at near Bayview, it feels like I don't feel safe for me, as I have 5 children that are usually running around, and sometimes they can go out without me, and I feel safe. I usually feel safe. I want Bayview to feel like home, to not feel like somewhere that I have to keep my eyes on my kids all the time. I usually feel safe to let my kids run around outside without me. So by having a road around Bayview, although it's a limited speed, but as I lived here for 8 years, and I never see that any car is running in the speed that they're supposed to run. So I very concerned about not only my children, but elders that live around me, not only at Bayview resident, but the CDA resident that live close by too. So, and by having a road at Bayview, not only cars that I don't feel safe, but stranger will take advantage of that road, and I don't feel safe for that. Yes, I think that's it from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next registrant is Tom Wilson, 719 Clark Court, Madison, in support, wishing to speak. Mr. Wilson, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, commissioners. I serve on the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, which voted unanimously in favor of this amendment, and also serve as the president of the Monona Bay Neighborhood Association, which submitted a letter of support for the amendment as well. I'm available to answer questions in those capacities. I'm also here as a City of Madison resident who lives near the Triangle, and the comments that follow are my own. Residents across the Triangle and the organizations that represent them have made it very clear that automobile access in the north section of this corridor is neither wanted nor needed. It provides no benefit to non-residents. This is not a commuter corridor or a metro route, for example. These positions have been reinforced by the findings of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and the CDA Board, and I will speak to them no further because I would not presume to know better what resident needs and wants are than they do. My voice is not the one that needs elevating, resident voices do. These same residents that you kept hearing about from staff are saying no. What I will address, though, was really driven home by the so-called new clause that was sent out 3 hours ago with little opportunity for stakeholders to see it or respond to it. This is not a new clause. It was floated at TPPB and it was rejected. It was floated to other community leaders over the past weeks and it was roundly rejected. Pushing it at the last minute, knowing that stakeholders reject it, is really unfortunate. It's also unfortunate the misleading way that some of these things are being presented. That concept A and B slide that you saw, for example, is particularly upsetting. It's very easy to envision a design where rather than having that ridiculously long driveway off of Braxton Place, access is simply provided from Regent Street. It is frustrating that an amendment was needed for this at all. The reason we're here is that when asked to create this design by the Alder, Bayview organizations, and other community leaders, which is in line, in my view, with the existing plan, the response was no. This is how we're going to do it, and if you don't like it, you'll have to use the legislative process to force us to do it that other way. So here we are. We interpreted this plan in a way that is so rigid and inflexible that we had to craft this highly prescriptive plan amendment that has consumed hundreds of hours of effort by residents and community leaders to craft, organize, educate, and advocate for, only to have it undermined at the last minute with this so-called new clause. Because despite overwhelming opposition by residents, former members of the Special Area Plan Subcommittee, Triangle organizations like Bayview, Triangle Faith Communities, Neighborhood Association, the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, the CDA Board, and the Alder, a few people still believe that they know better than literally everyone else. Please hear and respect the voices of this community. Support this amendment without the so-called new clause. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next registrant is Jared Pelsky, 735 West Main Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Pelsky, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, there is no person in attendance with that name.
Okay, the next registrant is Kristen Russell, 755 Braxton Place, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Ms. Russell.
You are muted on our side. Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is Kristen Russell. I lived at Braxton Place. I live on the first floor here facing West Washington. So I've lived here over 10 plus years. I am an amputee in a wheelchair. And I just like Tom had mentioned too, a road from Regent Street just doesn't make any sense. I watch every morning, I watch the commuters pile up at the South Park Street and West Wash light. And I can only imagine people trying to cut that corner on Regent Street to get into the line closer so they can turn faster onto South Park. And there just is no reason for a public road to be going through our neighborhoods. And what was mentioned before about everybody needing this drop-off pickup thing, so that would mean this road would be right up next to the new buildings at Bayview, as they had said. The noise, it's just not necessary. Our parking is fine. I've lived here 10 years and been picked up, dropped off hundreds of times from doctor's appointments and other things and shopping trips. And the only complaint I ever get is that Braxton Place hasn't been paved in the 10 years that I've been here. And I just am against, why take more of the land up for a public road coming through the neighborhood? It's just not necessary. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. The next registrant is Steve Jacobson, 755 Braxton Place, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Jacobson.
Chair, there is no person.
Okay, then
just
moving.
one sec.
Okay. So we do have, it looks like Jared Pelsky, who is now showing up. 735 West Main Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Pelsky.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I was the past president of the Monona Bay Neighborhood Association, as well as the vice chair on the Triangle Monona Bay Planning Commission or Committee. What I would like to say is that the city planning process was incredibly challenging for all of us on the committee. I'm disappointed in hearing what literally everything that the planning department has said. I'll say that we brought up during the planning process that we were having difficulty with Linda Horvath and her team listening to what we were asking. We had 6 meetings where at the end of the meeting, we continued to ask for a design that did not include a road, much less the oversized buildings that were not what the neighborhood wanted or the Triangle wanted. We went to Linda's boss at the time and ultimately involved Heather Stouter and ended up nowhere. Unfortunately, we're back here. So with this entire plan, unfortunately, it didn't listen to what the people wanted. As a member of the community of 10, 11 years in the neighborhood, I've stood up for the rights and the voice of the folks that live as neighbors. And it's quite frustrating to be here again and have the city come back with a plan that is not what we're agreeing or asking for. And it is definitely disappointing because we did ask the CDA for their plans at the time. At no point during the process did they give us any information. They said, you know what, we want to see what the neighborhood decides first. But unfortunately, the neighborhood didn't get to decide the plan. The planning department continued to push and force to the point where we had committee members that really want to be no longer a part of any charade. And that's frustrating because when I spoke to our alders both our alder tag as well as the others. They said, we are the city. We can help fix this. So this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm speaking up. The road is not necessary. They talk about constant visits with emergency personnel. There are visits, but there are not daily and not multiple times per week visits. And when you talk about the size of the road, we have the narrowest corner in Madison where current neighborhood association president lives, and that's a 17-foot road. And I have video of the largest ladder truck being able to make that corner. So all of these reasons that the city is coming up with, I don't believe, I don't trust, and I ask you to approve the amendment, not with what the city is adding, but as we've written in order to represent the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelsky. The next registrant is Steve Jacobson. Is there somebody on the list, Mr. Poole, by that name?
No, there is no person in attendance.
Okay.
With that name.
Then the next registrant is Peter Taglia, 718 West Brittingham Place, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Taglia.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Peter Taglia. I live on West Brittingham Place, and that is actually on the corner of West Brittingham and Rodney Court. Rodney Court, as you just heard, is a very narrow road, and we haven't had any of the problems that planning staff is talking about on that road. I'm just gonna put it out here because I'm not on any committees. I'm gonna put it out here as a 20-year member of a resident of the city who's raised 2 kids here, that this is outrageous. The arrogance of city staff, planning staff, I got to call it out. It's the second time in a year that staff has either ignored or misrepresented this neighborhood. Earlier, Planning Commission members might remember I had to deal with the tourist rooming house situation. And again, staff was arrogant and thought they knew better than what people on the ground knew. My neighborhood association submitted comments that were just ignored. And then I cannot believe I'm traveling, trying to take care of another property, that there was another draft issued today. I want the Planning Commission members just to note that this is just an outrage. Anyway, I'll try to be very more concise, but what's important to note here is that there's a diversity of people in our neighborhood, and I love it. I love it so much. I love that we work together and we look at what's going on, and we participated in the process for the Triangle Monona Bay Neighborhood Association. It included renters, it included single-family homeowners, It included small-scale property owners like myself that have a couple of properties. It also included large-scale property owners like, and representatives like Kurt Brink. None of us want this thing, and I'm just going to call it out. It's trash, and I can't believe that the planning department is continuing to waste my time and the time of all the people you heard talking previously pushing this. Car owners, non-car owners, everyone opposes it. And I just want to call it out right here. All people that I have talked to oppose this. The only supporters are staff. And that's a problem. I'd like to address the citizen volunteer members of the Planning Commission and say, do you know how much time has been wasted by volunteers because of the planning staff, their arrogance? And I just think that this is outrageous. And I urge you to have a vote of no confidence in planning staff leadership. To the alders that are on the Planning Commission and on the council.
Yeah, that concludes your available time. The next registrant is Margaret Bergamini, 454 North Few Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak. Ms. Bergamini, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Am I unmuted?
Yes, yeah. You're on.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. My name is Margaret Bergamini. I am a resident of the East Side at 454 North Hughes Street. I am also a member of the Transit Policy and Planning Board and the Metropolitan Planning Organization representing the city. Previously, I served on the Transit and Parking Commission. I also happened to work at 333 East Campus Mall. So I've been following these developments for many years with great interest. I want to second the remarks made by Mr. Taglia, by Mr. Wilson, and also by, pardon me for forgetting the name, but the previous chair of the Neighborhood Association about this process, how enormously frustrating it is to have staff coming back for another bite of the apple with this proposal. This proposal is essentially the same as that which the staff language is essentially the same as that which was presented to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and was rejected by that body. And there's a reason that it had been rejected, and there's a reason that the alder for this district has proposed this amendment. Aside from the fact that it has consistently been expressed by the residents of this neighborhood that this is not something that they want, it's not something that they feel is needed, and their voices have been ignored over and over again. For staff to suggest, for example, it's like each time it comes forward, there's another set of reasons for why this has to be a road that goes all the way through and is throughout accessible to vehicles, to motorized vehicles. That accessibility means accessibility for autos. And in this case, suggesting that Metro might reroute buses to serve the high school students who live in this neighborhood because this access road exists. That goes against everything I am aware of in terms of Metro route planning. I can't imagine where that thought came from. It tends to be a gospel truth that among planners that cul-de-sacs are not a good idea, that they're undesirable, that they cut people off. But this cul-de-sac does exactly the opposite. This cul-de-sac, the road.
Thank you, Ms. Bergamini. That concludes your available time. That concludes our speakers. Other registrants are...
Chair James Corona is back in if we want to go.
Oh, okay, great. Let's hear from Mr. Corona. James Corona, 523 Bayview, Madison, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak. Mr. Corona, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Corona?
James, we did have you unmuted. If you're using a headset or a microphone, you may have a mute button on the microphone. I can see you're toggling the mute on and off in Zoom. So you may want to check a device for
So, okay, you are unmuted here. Do you have a microphone that you might need to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. My name is James. I'm a resident of the Bayview neighborhood. I'm a father of two school children, and I fully support the amendment by Alder Tag Evers to allow only walking residents to our Triangle neighborhood area and bikers and emergency vehicles only to the new road section between Bayview Place and Regent Street. Importantly, Tag Evers' neighborhood-friendly proposal allows normal vehicle access to the southern part of the road between Regent Street and the West Washington Avenue. So Alder Tag's amendment limits car traffic in the section of the road between Braxton and Bayview neighborhoods. This is important because it provides a safer street walking access to neighborhood residents, especially to slow walkers, to the elderly, and there are many elderly, to the physically disabled residents, and there are many physically disabled residents, to the mentally disabled residents, which there are many, and to the neighborhood children, and there are a lot of children in this area. Wisely, Tag Evers' proposal still allows full car access to the southern part of the road between Regent Street and West Washington Avenue. So that Tag Evers' amendment is a nice compromise. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Corona. I'm glad we finally got you in there. The next registrant is Alexis London, Bayview Foundation, Madison in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions representing the Bayview Foundation. The next, all the remaining registrants are in support, not wishing to speak, but not available to answer questions. Are there any questions of any of the registrants? Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I have a question for Margaret Bergamini. She got cut off when she was starting to talk about how cul-de-sacs generally are thought of as bad, but here it's good, and then her time was up, and I'm wondering if she could finish her thoughts and explain that.
Ms. Bergamini?
Yeah, I'd be happy to very briefly. Generally speaking, cul-de-sacs are thought of designs that are remnants of the 1960s and neighborhoods where the intent was to exclude folks. They also tended to interrupt the grid system, which is easier to serve. A grid system is much, much easier to serve by public transit, et cetera. But in the case of this is the best cul-de-sac I've ever seen in my life. And the reason that it is that specifically because of the way it is used by residents and because of the community. It keeps the speed low. The connectivity out to Park Street is fine. People are constantly using these areas as the neighborhood stands now, and hopefully as the neighborhood is redesigned or redeveloped. There are a lot of people who live in this neighborhood who do not drive, who use mobility devices, who are young or old. Cars should not be given the priority here. It is not necessary to provide this access out to Regent Street for automobiles. And I can say that both as somebody who's interested in road design, but also as somebody who formerly was a driver providing services into this neighborhood, specifically paratransit services. The staff is giving that as a justification that there needs to be better access for paratransit vehicles and whatnot. The access was just fine. The only access this would provide is for cut-through traffic.
Thank you, Ms. Bergamini. Does that answer your question, Alder Rummel?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of any of the other registrants? Any questions of any of the registrants? Alder Evers.
Yes, I wonder if we could ask, I could ask a question of Lexi London,
yes,
Bayview's executive director.
Ms. London.
Yes, Alexis has written a letter to you all, I believe. I wonder if she could summarize her support for the plan amendment and speak to the many residents who were not able to participate. We saw how difficult it is for many of the residents in this neighborhood to participate in our meetings. And I wonder if she can't take a moment to voice her concerns as someone who works on a daily basis with the residents at Bayview.
Hi, this is Lexi. I think my internet connection is a little unstable tonight, so sorry about that. I want to just say that this has been consistently an issue that the neighborhood has dealt with for the last 3 years. Bayview has been in the midst of our planning process for our redevelopment. I was a member of the Triangle Monona Bay Neighborhood Committee. And we've brought this issue to our residents on numerous occasions. And every single time, consistently, the residents, by over 70%, indicate that this is not something that they want. And I really think it's time that we listen to the residents. This is an issue that they feel strongly about. And this cul-de-sac works. I agree with everything Margaret said. It actually works in this neighborhood, and we're increasing access by creating a leg that goes from Braxton to West Washington. And that's going to create more access for the residents. It's going to create more access for the public to get to Bayview. We've designed a development that creates a ton of permeability between the neighborhood and Bayview. And we've done so in a way that is safe and consistent with community development. We're interested in creating a walkable, safe, bikeable neighborhood that focuses on community, public connections. And that's about people connecting with people. And we just don't see the need for a road that goes all the way from Regent Street to West Washington. Residents have been focused on safe access across Regent Street and safe access across Park Street and West Washington. That's what they're interested in seeing change. They're not so much interested in seeing a full vehicle access road. And that's just been consistent for the last 3 years. And I really, I think this is about equity. I think it's about listening to the voices of the residents who live in this neighborhood. And they're very clear again tonight in saying that they want a road that is not a full road. They prefer the amended proposal. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Ms. London. Are there any further questions either of Ms. London or any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, are there any questions of staff? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. I was wondering if traffic engineering could just talk through how you create a road that allows emergency vehicles, but not regular vehicle traffic. And then if this allowed vehicle traffic down the road, if you could walk through all of those things that would be included so that it wouldn't be a through street. I know bump outs were mentioned and the right in, right out. And I believe speed humps were included in the report. And I'm not clear because I know those make having emergency vehicles have access difficult too.
Mr. Malloy.
Sure, that's a great question. So with our design, we would design the street to be similar to an East Campus Mall or a State Street Mall. They have planters and we could use pavers there. And we actually signed State Street Mall with signage that says motor-driven vehicles prohibited except authorized vehicles. So we could do something similar to that. And we've actually had pretty good success at the State Street Mall. So that's what I would model it after. We'd also can sign at 15 miles per hour like we do on East Campus Mall. And I think, with that, I think we could reduce the trips that are going through there and slow the cars down. I guess, another thing that I wanted to point out was that the north section is only going to be 26 feet wide. The 34-foot section is only a short section that is south of Braxton that allows 5 parking stalls or so. It's a cut-in parking. So it is going to be 26 feet, which is the narrowest we can go to allow buildings on both sides to have flexibility to meet fire codes for the aerial apparatus lanes, because we're expecting both buildings to be over 30 feet in height. So that's the reason we had to do the minimum 26 feet there. But I think if we design it similar to those malls, I think we could have success here.
Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Did you have any follow-up questions, Alder Lemmer?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. This is for traffic engineering. Thanks for coming, Sean. You were mentioning East Campus Mall, and of course, I did sort of, when the thought of it being extended, I did think of of Brad Murphy, because this was one of his big ideas, and it made me happy for a moment to think of his idea finally getting implemented all the way. But people have talked a lot about this road, but no one's really mentioned East Campus. So I'm just wondering how that plays into this whole parcel transportation grid. And I do have a second question when you're done with that. You're muted still.
Oh, I guess apparently there must have been an update. I'm not allowed to unmute myself. Well, yeah, that is, I guess, part of the challenge that the CDA is having, is that they have East Campus Mall, a ped mall on one side, and then this ped mall on the other side. So that can become challenging for the site. But that being said, we have residence halls that have access off East Campus Mall, and we don't have many issues. So there's Og Hall and access to some of the buildings on campus. But it is, I guess, unusual to have that on two sides. I can't think of a site that has two malls that close to each other, but it definitely is doable to allow access to that site from the malls.
So when you're saying two malls, you're talking about this extension as the other mall, the new through?
Right. It'd be, because we're going to design it similar to a mall, East Campus Mall. So it theoretically it'd be like having one on each side. But we have plenty of buildings that have access off East Campus Mall, and it could work here as well.
And so you hadn't ever really thought, could East Campus Mall serve as this, throughway that would also be a PED, only, and or emergency city vehicles?
Oh, that certainly is still a goal. No,
I know, but have you thought about that being the only through road as opposed to having the two?
I think when the plan was first, when this was first developed, that was our thought, was to emphasize East Campus Mall. But I don't think it hurts to have a second PED mall area. But I guess we still have that crossing of East Campus at Regent. It's emphasized with the RFB, and that's still going to be there. I don't think it necessarily takes away from East Campus Mall.
I wasn't suggesting. I was just trying to think through the site design, because I pulled up on Google Maps this whole area, and there's, obviously if it gets redeveloped, the existing road that cuts at the very tip of the triangle, that would go away. Is that correct?
I guess I'm not sure what road you're referring to.
It's like a parking lane access to the tip of the triangle at Regent and West Wash that residents can at least get to from West Washington. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like they get there from Regent. Does that entryway go away with this extension idea?
I believe, that with the Bayview's site plan, they may have a small parking lot over there.
Right.
That isn't planned for public purposes, but that is part of Bayview's site plan.
I'm just trying to understand how, if the concern is getting people access, how it's used now. But I don't know if I have any other questions at this point. And I guess I do want to say too, if I was on the Plan Commission and didn't hear all these concerns before, I apologize. So thank you all for bringing them.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify on Regent Street. So if this amendment were to go through, and I'm looking at the kind of two options that were in one of the attachments with new building A on the north and the building B on the south. Would building A be able to have a new curb cut off of Regent Street to provide some drop-off access? I know that new curb cuts are not generally desirable, but I'm just trying to determine if there's something that absolutely prohibits that or if it could be incorporated into that eventual design.
Mr. Malloy?
That's a good question as well. So, from traffic engineering's perspective, I wouldn't recommend having a curb cut in addition to Regent Street, especially when you have two pedestrian malls that'd be in between there. So that would be a little tight to put a third curb cut in there. Certainly, it would have to be restricted to right in, right out. The lefts would be a problem there because there's a little bit of a curve. So that would be problematic. It would obviously be, much more, it'd be safer for us, I guess, if we had it on Braxton or this new mall, if they had an access there. The region would be problematic. It's certainly possible, but it's not ideal.
Ms. Stouter, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think I defer to Sean on
okay,
these
great.
good questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have any follow-ups, Commissioner Solheim?
No, none at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes. Could staff explain how the ballards would work in the concept B that's being proposed off of Regent and off of Braxton?
Mr. Malloy?
I think Chris Petakowski is still here. I might have him answer that. It's more of a street question. But I think that would be similar to what we have in East Campus Mall.
Mr. Petakowski?
Hello. Yes. So if we're going to allow emergency vehicles, we haven't done in the city. Some people have done like breakaway bollards or even lowering bollards, but we haven't, to my knowledge, installed those at this point. So we'd have to kind of look into that a little further if that's the way we go forward. What we've done with like State Street is rely on signage and then make the street kind of the context of the street look not like a street. So in this case, if it's a 13-foot wide bike path, we probably would propose not putting curbs on and have kind of an apron similar to a bike path entrance that you'd see. So I'm not sure we were committed to the bollards right now. That was kind of a concept in the plan, but once we know what the exact format of the street is, we'd work into the final design, and that would probably go to the Transportation Commission to get approved.
Thank you, Mr. Pedikowski. Did you have any follow-up?
I'm just trying to, trying to visualize and I think this gets at Commissioner Romo's question too, visualize what that would look like. The diagram says that for fire access, you have to have a 26-foot wide, at least pavement area. I guess I want someone to verify that, in that the curb access at Regent would likely be like a driveway rather than a public street, and there may be pavers rather than asphalt. So I guess I'm trying to visualize what that would be, and if indeed in the future, because all city councils can determine what happens in the future, if they determine that area, let's not call it a street because people don't like to talk about streets, but access way, if that is opened up because of certain reasons that we can't even visualize at this point in time, could that happen? Designed to a standard that it could accommodate the vehicles at that point. So I guess again, I'm trying to visualize what it would be, what it would look like, and I understand what the neighborhood would like, that would have pedestrian and bicycles pretty much only, with the exception of maybe a fire truck coming in and combating a fire in the future. But I guess that's my question. I guess I know I was rambling.
So you're looking for the minimum width that would be necessary for the emergency vehicle access, right? And then what the look of the street would be. Okay, Mr. Pedikowski.
Yeah. So right now, since this, only one side of the street is developing, it would be built half, and it would, be 13 feet as a condition, like in a couple of years from now, right before CDA develops, and then the look of the streets we have to design, and we can go through those things with the TC, I think, to determine exactly how it looks as far as pavers or those kinds of things. So the 26-foot wide, where that comes in, is if you need the vertical fire apparatus to put its outriggers out, and it's not a question of driving down the street the size, but to put its outriggers out and fight the fires for the taller buildings. That's so that if we need that in the future, then we'd have to, the city would have to decide at that point, whether to widen this street, this 13-foot path or not.
But you're saying that would depend on the height of the building that was built there, whether the 26 would be required or not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Did you have any further questions?
No, at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Solheim.
Just a quick question. Would the fire access on the mall just be on the one side, or would there have to be fire access also on the East Campus mall?
can try that. We don't have anybody from fire here tonight, but seeing that, so the CDA hasn't drafted any redevelopment plans for their site, but our guess is that they will have multiple buildings close to Regent Street, one of which will likely be very close to this new street that we've been focused on. They may have another that's close enough to East Campus Mall that it could gain fire access from the future extension of East Campus Mall. And so I think the buildings will be tall enough, that's 30 feet or higher, to warrant a certain amount of the building face being next to a street or paved area 26 feet wide. So fire access can happen either in the public right-of-way or on private property. And usually in urban areas, when you're on the suburban parts of the city, it's different. Sometimes it's supported on site itself, on the private property. But usually in urban areas, the street itself is utilized for that vertical fire access. And I think East Campus Mall, if I'm not mistaken, would also be designed to support emergency vehicles and vertical fire access on that western edge of the CDA property.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Stouter. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. Ms. Solheim's question reminded me of one I also had. So the plans, which Ms. Stouter just said there's no proposed plans yet for CDA, but when I sort of skimmed through the Monona Triangle plan, it talked about underground parking. Did either CDA or Bayview figure out like using the driveway access to underground parking to serve as entrance for, service vehicles and drop off as opposed to a street during any of this process? I don't know who might know that. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
I think maybe Matt Wachter might be best to take that. Again, it's very early, but Matt may have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're definitely not that far along. As was mentioned, our residents don't have high rates of car ownership. So right now, we're served by surface lots, but we haven't done any geotechnical work to have a sense of soils and those sorts of issues. So I think we're too early, but we'd certainly look at that.
Because it wasn't so much the parking, it was the pick up and drop off and kind of service for people. And maybe it's too late, but maybe we could ask Miss London if they had thought about that as if it's appropriate to get back to public speaker.
With the consent of the body, we can certainly. So any objections? Seeing none, could we have Miss London?
Sure. So we have two underground parking areas. One is going to be accessible off of West Washington, and it will access the 48 unit building that's going to be on the corner of West Washington Regent Street. And that will be an underground parking lot under the apartment building, and also access to a surface lot in that area. And then we also have an underground parking lot that's going to be accessible off of West Washington from La Mariposa. So people could take La Mariposa and then, so Heather's pulled up a map. So yeah, if you're coming south west on West Washington, you would make a right, and then you'd be able to access a 25 unit apartment building there. Neither of those areas would be, that one in particular would not be a drop-off area. However, you come up to where the intersection is at Braxton Place, and then you have the Bayview Community Center right where that tees. And then that's a perfect drop-off spot right there. We've made that wide enough, and we've created a plaza around the community center where there's enough space for people to be dropped off by cabs and delivery vehicles to be able to access the site. And then there's a pretty generous surface lot there as well. And so that's how we've accommodated drop-offs and taxis. And so that was something we thought a lot about in the planning process, because a lot of Bayview residents are also not drivers. Many of our seniors don't have their own vehicles, and so they rely on family members or paratransit or cabs to get to doctor's appointments. And so this is a logical pickup spot for them.
Thank you, Ms. London. Does that answer your question, Alder Rummel?
I have one other question, and thanks so much for sharing that, because I haven't really seen it before. It looks wonderful. But the entryway that you were describing is from West Wash. Is it fair to, put that in context of that other maps we're looking at? Is that just the other side of what could be the street that we're amending out of this, or is this a separate entrance? Can you fit that little piece into the bigger map? Help me understand.
Alder Rummel, are you speaking of where the community center is and where Braxton Tees?
Yeah, so where Braxton Tees, if you went straight north, that's not a street now, is it?
Well, we've only shown the 13 feet that Chris was speaking of, because Bayview would only, we were only showing that 13 feet because we don't know yet what CDA was planning. And so that's what our design shows. And we show it as kind of a bike and pedestrian only access point. However, that could get expanded to be the 26 feet wide as originally proposed in the plan. But that's not what we're showing here. So that's what the 13-foot wide lane would look like.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Mr. Malloy, did you have something you wish to comment on?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the street section that Alder Rummel was referring to, the intent was to have that go one way north in the interim until CDA developed. And when the CDA develops, it could become a 26-foot two-way street. That was pre-amendment, but I just wanted to make clarification that was intended to be a one-way in the interim heading northbound.
So that's already approved? I mean, help me understand how that fits into what's before us, what you just said.
So they did the CSM, so the land has been dedicated for that street. Their half, they're 30 feet. I don't believe the street project, it's going to be a public works project, has been approved yet, just the land division.
And if I could just add to that, maybe I'll use my cursor just to point out a few things here. So as Lexi mentioned, this is, and I apologize if this is the very latest plan set, but this is what I could find from actually last spring. So it's close enough. So this is what Bayview has been asked to dedicate for this new street, this half of it. And what they're showing here is a way for this to be utilized as a temporary northbound aisle, just like Sean described. But you'll also see next to it, there's a very wide sidewalk here that I'll even zoom in just to show the concept drawing here. There's curb, gutter, and sidewalk. And if this stretch of street is to move forward as a bike ped only street, then there's no need anymore for this sidewalk next to it on the Bayview side. And so what we would expect moving forward then is for some time until the CDA redevelops to see, something slightly wider than a bike path on this side. And then when CDA redevelops, and that's really, again, the subject of staff, I think, hesitation on this amendment is when the CDA would then dedicate their half of this street. And the future design of this western half of the street, nothing is really precluded by what happens on the east side. Let's say the east side moves forward without a sidewalk, without curb and gutter. We can always come back from a physical standpoint and design the west side for the CDA's needs, whether that includes, a sidewalk next to their building, curb, gutter, perhaps a couple parking stalls for this kind of loading and drop-off area. if this stretch of street is ever to provide very limited access to vehicles, we think that's what it would be for, to serve the CDA on the west side of this future street. But for the foreseeable future, for the next few years, it's going to be slightly wider than a bike path.
And just one more question, and then I'll let it go. So on either side of the CDA, they're giving up some of their property for future road use, whether it's the expansion of East Campus Mall or on this side for the other side of a street.
That's correct. So they'll be dedicating land to the city for both of those purposes. On the west side, it's East Campus Mall. That's an extension of what East Campus Mall is today, all the way down to the lake. On this east side, that's really the subject of our discussion tonight. And you'll see, as Lexi mentioned, the Bayview site has this access, with what we think will be limited vehicle usage to get to the community center, to get to this apartment building, et cetera. But on this north side, between Braxton and Regent, which is obvious, it's disappeared right now, the amendment really would remove automobile access from that to serve this side of the CDA property.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Alder Rummel?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
One last question. Which of these sides of the development of that proposed street or pedestrian way is moving forward sooner? Is it the one that you just showed in the diagram, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Bayview is imminent. So they are ready to, this was approved by the Plan Commission already. They have their final plans in for sign off right now. And so they intend to break ground this spring. Okay. And obviously I would defer to Lexi on scheduled details, but it's happening very soon.
And that's orientated towards families. And the opposite side is for disability, people with disabilities, or?
So our CDA, and I'll let Matt speak a little bit more to this, has a variety of residents, all ages and abilities. Matt, do you want to share a little bit about the current demographics of the residents there?
Sure. So our residents of the Triangle, we have 330 odd units. Only about a dozen serve families with children. The rest are really focused on we have a large number of people who are elderly, a large number of people who are disabled, but it tends to not be families at the Triangle site.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, I see no raised hands. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, commissioners, and thank you to all the residents who and advocates who spoke earlier. I have some brief comments I emailed earlier to you, and I wish to add to those as well. My comments are augment two other statements I made. One, prior to the TPPB meeting, that there was a unanimous support for this plan amendment. I made similar, somewhat adjusted comments to CDA. They're both in Legistar. I trust that you've had time to read them. In response to planning's last minute suggested addition to the plan amendment, It must be made clear that staff has been reluctant to hear the voices of residents who have not wavered in their opposition to anything resembling a through street from Regent to West Washington. I've spoken forcefully on this matter, both at TPB and most recently at CDA, and as alder for the district. It's deeply concerning to me that residents have struggled repeatedly to make their voices heard. I say this in full awareness that I have caused some offense in bringing up these concerns. My claim that staff viewed connectivity through a car-centric lens has not landed well, and I've been informed of that, and I appreciate that. I'm open to criticism. I realize members of planning staff who have worked on the plan are committed to equity, but the intent to honor equity while insisting a cut-through street would be good for the triangle, despite consistent and repeated opposition, can only mean that despite good intentions, the impact has been inequitable and clearly a source of deep frustration and even bitterness among Triangle residents. As I sat and listened to Linda Horvath's statement, I too am frustrated. She mentioned access to Bayview's beautiful new community center without pointing out that the new location on the new road south of Braxton will be fully accessible from either Braxton or the new street connecting Braxton to West Washington. Neither Bayview residents nor Bayview staff have ever once asked for car access to the new community center from Regent Street. Ms. Horvath went on to acknowledge the concerns of Bayview residents that their children would have a safe means to cross Regent Street to catch the school bus. Let it be known, and I wish to add, that none of these parents have asked that the school bus be able to enter the triangle from Regent Street. They have not asked for this. They have asked for safe crossing on the perimeter streets, including Regent, a request that has not yet been answered by staff. Staff's last-minute request to insert added text retains the through street as a default position, but not for the reasons argued for in the past. In the past, staff claimed, and Ms. Horvath underscored yet again tonight, that the street and its, let me add, or streets, to staff initially proposed a grid of 5 new streets. They proposed this with the view that this would solve a connectivity deficit. This deficit apparently would be resolved by adding automobile access, but residents loudly and repeatedly said no. And it's not clear to me that the matter of deliveries ever came up as the primary argument in favor of the north-south Regent to West Washington Street, but it's now the one staff is clinging to. I'm also not clear on how CDA resident service, delivery, and mobility needs cannot be met via access from Braxton, Regent, and West Washington. Indeed, we heard testimony tonight, I believe it was from Kristen Russell, who lives in the Gay Braxton apartments, that delivery over 100 times she has received apparently right to her apartment, easy delivery. And it does not require a separate through street road to be able to make that delivery possible. Reducing the proposed 78-foot right-of-way by a third, because yes, what in this new street they're proposing with sidewalks, a 78-foot right-of-way. We could reduce this by a third because sidewalks will not be needed and 26 feet is all that is needed for fire trucks. This reduction will allow for expanded design footprint, an expanded design footprint. So if CDA does decide they need a driveway, just that's what they're talking about, they can plan for one, just not on this shared use path reserved for the use of the 100 children at Bayview and the many residents we heard from tonight from the CDA apartments with mobility challenges. So I urge you, please, commissioners, listen to the voices of Triangle residents and keep the plan amendment as is written. And for that, I thank you and ask your consideration to vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Alder. Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Alder Rummel.
I want to move approval of the proposed amendment which I don't have in front of me to read, sorry. Amending the Triangle Monona Bay neighborhood plan to revise the transportation recommendation for the north-south public street from Regent Street to West Washington from biped friendly to biped only with emergency vehicle access.
Thank you, Alder. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. Alder Rummel, did you wish to speak to your motion?
The more I dive into the proposal, the more questions it raises for me for East Campus Mall. And it just seems like we're not really finished figuring out if we really do want to have more street access, if that that campus mall shouldn't be revisited. I think I share the concerns of and heard the testimony of how people were able to access the property now and wanted to preserve that kind of internal off of Braxton Place use or now off of West Washington. And I agree with the Alder's amendment.
Okay, thank you, Alder Rummel. Any further discussion, comments before we vote? Commissioner Cantrell.
I'm really torn on this proposal because I can understand the residents and their concerns about a through street and about cut through traffic and the safety of the kids and the individuals that live in that area. But you know, on the other hand, access is important. And the difficulty is that we're moving forward on a concept that we haven't fully designed yet, and and we're kind of limiting ourselves in a way that it may be inappropriate in the future. And I guess that concerns me a lot. But you know, again, I understand the concerns of the residents. But I think that an access way could be designed similar to you know, the campus mall, and so that it would limit drastically the amount of through traffic, and that it would work, and it would be an area that, almost like a festival street, so that actually the residents could actually take advantage of farmers markets and those sorts of things. So I guess, again, I'm kind of torn. I'd like to hear what other commission members would have to weigh in on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, so I was on hiatus from the Plan Commission when this plan came through, so I'm really just coming to it now for the first time, although I got to look at it at TPPB and had some of the same back and forth that Commissioner Cantrell just mentioned. I ended up voting for the amendment as presented. And here are some considerations. One is that the plan, as it is now, with a two-way street and full access, was probably, which sounds to me now like was ignored what the residents wanted there and was too much. We don't need that level of connectivity there. Had the original plan come back and said we need a Woonerf with a driveway to this new CDA site or something, then maybe we wouldn't have had the reaction that we're having now, and we might be able to massage that. But it seems like it went overboard on the auto connectivity. Not that auto connectivity is bad. I mean, I think that we have several places around the city where we've had these issues. The far southwest side on Jeffy Trails, one still sticks in my craw. And parenthetically, if this were people of relatively high socioeconomic and entitled position in the community like they are down there, I'd probably vote the other way. This is a vulnerable population that has not been treated well over the years in Madison, and probably deserves the benefit of the doubt. So the reason I came down against what might be the technically correct plan for more connectivity and reserving access to CDA is to give those residents go with those residents for once. And if CDA comes back and says, hey, we really need a driveway or some kind of thing there, they could dedicate some space, and I think they could still accomplish it there. We don't have a plan, and going forward with something in the plan that looks like a two-way street or a major, a roadway, I think is wrong given the feelings of the community. And so I'm just swayed by the residents. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I support the amendment. I agree with what Commissioner Sundquist just said. And, generally, I do think that there are, of course, things that you can do to limit speed and improve safety and limit vehicle access on a street. I keep thinking about all of the large events that happen in this area, not just football games, but specifically the Kohl Center, and how much traffic. And I can just absolutely see so many people cutting through there to avoid the West Wash intersection. And so many of those events finish up at night, and just all of the kids on the site combined with that makes me feel that a full street through there really does not make sense. I do, of course, have concerns about making sure that folks on the CDA site, when that is developed, have access to deliveries and pickup and all of their services. So would certainly be open to incorporation of a driveway somewhere in the future. But I agree that a full service street, particularly in that location, I don't think is the best fit.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hagenow.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said up to this point. I hadn't even thought about the major events that are happening, as Commissioner Solheim brought up, and that's even more of a reason to try and eliminate that drive-through traffic from happening. I mean, I can definitely just imagine conflicts happening there between drivers and pedestrians in that area and in the neighborhood. As I was listening to testimony tonight from residents, I can't remember some of this as contentious as some that has been brought up this evening, and it's striking to me, and I find myself being a little kind of disappointed in how those voices were unheard through the planning process, seemingly here, and I think we need to look at making sure that does not happen again. And I don't remember seeing this come up at Plan Commission, and I'm not sure that I may have been there that night. I vaguely remember it, but I don't remember this level of opposition to this street being brought up at that meeting. So, I apologize as well if I didn't hear those voices loud and clear, but they were certainly brought forward here tonight. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Spencer.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yep.
Okay, and I have a new microphone, so keep your fingers crossed. I don't have a lot to add. I did want to say I do, in general, support the amendment. Coming into the meeting, I wasn't quite sure that I really did support it because Commissioner Cantrell had brought up, issues I'm torn too about the access. We're always supposed to think about future needs, future residents, and thinking about the future residents for CTA and having that flexibility so they can have access. And then, of course, concern about vehicles. I do think I like your idea of calling it an access way so that, people can still use it as a public space and still have emergency vehicles go through there. But I do support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I support the amendment too, and it sounds like the amendment is going to pass. And I actually kind of wanted to just briefly comment on what Commissioner Hagenaw had to say, and I think someone else might have mentioned this earlier, is when we heard about this in the past, were there voices that we didn't hear? Did we unhear anybody? I honestly don't remember. I remember the discussion of the larger number of streets and reducing that, but I don't remember this particular street being a point of contention. But it's possible it was, and we did not hear those voices. The other thing I'd want to say is, we should examine that, and I encourage staff to examine how they may or may not have contributed to that. But I also think there was some kind of strong language used criticizing staff, and perhaps they deserve some of that criticism, but I just want to remind everybody that I think staff was well-intentioned, and we have a disagreement here, but I think they were well-intentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Are there any other comments before we come to a vote? Okay, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. No raised hands. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is agenda item 6, Legistar 63899, approving the amendment to the project plan for tax incremental District 36, Capital Gateway, City of Madison. And I believe that Dan Rolfs and Matt Nicolajeski are here and available to answer questions. And unless requested, there will not be a presentation, rather simply responses to any questions that commissioners might have. I just want to...
Chair Zellers, I think we do have one registrant who had indicated.
Seeing that, okay. Yes, we do. Catherine Pensick. I will open the public hearing then. Catherine Pensick, 207 North Dickinson Street, Madison, neither support nor oppose, and wishing to speak to this TID amendment. Ms. Pensick.
Hello, are we connected?
Yes.
Great. I'm here not to oppose or to promote this, but I just wanted to share a concern about the whole TIF program. We need to be really careful whenever we put government money and our tax dollars into a private business. And I think this project looks like a good project, the $7 million that they're planning to give to the public market. And I personally live near there, and I'm looking forward to this market. It looks like a really great idea. But I'm also concerned because I was looking into the TIF program a bit, and I see that you are supposed to give 10% of the TIF money to affordable housing. And so far, you've spent quite a bit of money in this project, but you haven't put any dollars toward affordable housing that I can see. And I was wondering if maybe you will try to, change that in the future and try to get some affordable housing projects, and also maybe some help for things that are good for the whole city, I know TIF can be used for projects that want to put on more solar and more, things that are more environmentally sound that might cost the building a bit more, but would help them upfront to pay it to begin with. So just a word of caution, be really careful. These projects, this program really depends on the people that run it to have good faith. And I trust you guys to do that. Just keep your eyes open and really keep tabs on the money where it's going. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ms. Pensack. Are there any questions of Ms. Pensack? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Now, are there any questions of staff? Alder Rummel.
Well, thanks to Ms. Pensack. I'm going to ask Matt Mcallister to talk about some of the money that we've used in the past for TID 36, so that some of our most observant public is aware of what's going on.
Mr. Mcallister?
Sure.
Oh, you're stuck.
Alder Rummel, and good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Mcallister, the Economic Development Director for the City of Madison. We have used TIF within TID 36 to support several residential projects, some of which included affordable housing as a component of the project, which is why within the audit of the TID, it may not necessarily be specified as affordable housing because it was part of larger projects. So we have used TIF to support some projects that do have affordable housing. We've used TIF in that program to support employment projects and to support a lot of public infrastructure throughout the district, some street enhancements, as well as assistance towards the South Livingston Garage. So again, there's been a variety of both public and private projects that have been funded by that TID throughout the years.
Did you have any follow-ups, Alder Rummel?
Matt, just remind me, was it the Stonehouse project? I mean, just call out the ones that got affordable, that used TIF for affordable housing.
Yes, the primary one is the Stonehouse development project, a portion of which is affordable.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Alder Rummel?
No.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I recommend that the Plan Commission forward a recommendation of approving the amendment to the project plan for TIF District 36 to the City Council.
And that is seconded by Alder Rummel. Okay, thank you. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, obviously this is one of the most successful TIF districts, I think, in the city of Madison that we've ever had. And I drive East Washington all the time and see all the development that has occurred within the last 10 years. And I'm looking forward to other improvements, including the public market, which this will facilitate. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Any further comments, discussion? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That is the last item on our agenda, other than business by members and secretary's report. Is there any business by members? Commissioner Cantrell.
I just wanted to, it distressed me tonight about the staff bashing that occurred on the Triangle Neighborhood Plan. As a 35-year professional planner myself, and I'm working with many, many planners and plan commissions, and we have one of the most capable planning staffs in the Midwest. I am so impressed with our planners here, and we should be very proud of them. Obviously, sometimes we as a planner, we get tied into various, I guess, requirements like access to streets, and obviously that's certainly a debatable issue and question, but it was not malicious on our planning staff, which they recommended a through street in this area. I probably would have done it myself if I was in their position. And sometimes we just lose sight of that as a planner. But it's not that they disregarded the comments of the neighborhood. They just came to a different conclusion and recommended their professional opinion on that to the Plan Commission and the City Council. So I guess I just wanted to say, please, that I really appreciate our staff here and what all they do, and I know they get criticized sometimes, but I guess I just want them to know that I support them, and obviously we do make mistakes sometimes, but anyway, they're a good team, and I think we should be very proud of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell, and I certainly agree with you 100%. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I also want to echo what Commissioner Cantrell said. You know, I sometimes say there's more than one way to do something, and maybe this is the time where the other way was maybe the correct way. But again, I think our staff really works hard and thinks through a lot of things, so I appreciate them. I raised my hand to let the Plan Commission know that planning staff in consultation with the council is putting on a public listening session. I don't know if that's quite the right word, and maybe Heather was planning to talk about this later, but I just want to hope that some of you will feel free to join us Monday, March 1st. And of course, it's not my calendar, so I don't know exact time, but so I'll defer to Heather, but it's on a Zoom and you need to be invited. And I've put it out in my neighborhood blog, and I'm sure others have as well. So hopefully we'll get good attendance.
Thank you, Alder. Any other business by members? Okay, next is the Secretary's report. Ms. Stouter.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Zellers. And I do want to thank a couple commissioners for those comments. I will share those with other staff who were here tonight and spent some time with us. Importantly, this is never about staff. It's never about us. And we want to continue to provide a careful professional opinion, listening very carefully to our community and thinking about current and future residents. And that's what we'll continue to do. Learned a lot through this amendment process and always open to criticism. So thank you for your support, but certainly don't be afraid to nudge us as staff. And like I said, I'll pass along those words to my several colleagues who are here tonight as well. Looking forward to upcoming meetings, as Alder Rummel mentioned, and I'll just restate clearly the day and time. So Monday, March 1st, starting at 5:30 to 7:30, we'll be hosting a community question and answer session about the new batch of housing ordinances that were recently introduced. Those ordinance amendments will be back before the Plan Commission on March 22nd. And our hope is that by holding this March 1st session, which will be recorded, we can address some questions in advance of the Plan Commission's consideration of those ordinance amendments. We have sent out a link to all alders and Plan Commissioners, and then also all of our registered contacts with the city's neighborhood associations. And I would just ask, as alders and commissioners, please feel free to distribute that link broadly, and I can resend it to you as well. Importantly, that March 1st meeting will be noticed as a potential quorum for both the Common Council and the Plan Commission. It's not necessarily an expectation that you attend and listen as a Plan Commissioner, but no, don't fear any quorum issues in case you're interested in popping in or attending. Of course, as I mentioned, you can always watch it later, even in double time, if you want to. So that'll happen on March 1st. Those ordinance amendments, just since I'm on this subject, will also be at the city's Housing Strategy Committee this Thursday. And we'll likely have a preview of the presentation that will be shared again then on March 1st. And so, if you're interested in attending Housing Strategy, please let me know so that I can make sure we don't have a quorum issue there this Thursday evening. And now back to our regular meetings. Looking forward to the March 8th meeting, I just want to provide some clarity, some changes to the list that you see in front of you here for upcoming matters. We will have a staff update on the Odana area plan. So this is the area surrounding West Town Mall. Anticipating a 20 to 30 minute overview by staff, and then really would welcome your questions and careful thought as that process continues. It's a tough planning process. We're looking at a phased approach to what could be an major evolution of this area over time. But the timing, of course, is unknown for when the area will really begin to change. So we have a lot of unique questions, I think, about phasing, about the flexibility of our proposed land uses, and more. So bring your thinking caps, help us through that, and guide us in a good direction on March 8th. We will not see the return of the Ramish Farm plat. That will be further referred, perhaps for several cycles. The next item on the list is the batch of housing ordinances. So that will show up on the agenda, but will be promptly referred to March 22nd. It was noticed already in the newspaper, and so we'll need to show it on that agenda, but it won't be heard at the March 8th meeting. We can do a small dance of joy. Finally, we'll bring back to you the front yard setback ordinances relating to street trees. So providing just a little bit more space to diversify our street canopy in our densest, most intensely redeveloping areas, sponsored by Alders Heck, Rummel, and a couple others. And I think those are the ones most worth mentioning for March 8th. Except the obvious referral that was made tonight of the 126 South Langdon project. So that'll be 126 Langdon will be back on the March 8th agenda. Moving forward to March 22nd, I'll just mention actually the housing ordinance amendments here. I think that's the item that will likely take most of the focus of discussion at the March 22nd meeting. And I believe that is all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Okay. With that concludes our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenhow. And we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, thank you all very much, and see you in a couple of weeks.